Millionaire catches little girl stealing bread from kitchen. Instead of calling the police, he did this. The Grayson estate was a monument of silence. Everything inside it was orderly. Spotless marble floors, antique portraits that hadn't been glanced at in years, and a man who moved through it like a ghost. Elliot Grayson, 34, was once the name behind empires, deals, and headlines. Now, he was the quiet presence in a house where Joy had not stepped foot since the night his fiancée died. The accident stole her from him and turned their future into a mausoleum of memories. There were no children in the Grayson house, no laughter, no fingerprints on the glass, just rules and silence. But that night, something changed. Down in the grand kitchen, past the industrial stoves and polished countertops, a soft shuffling broke the hush. A shadow moved near the pantry, small, low to the ground, barefoot. Millie Carter, 4 years old, wore a tattered beige dress that was a little too short and a little too thin for November. Her blonde curls bounced as she tiptoed across the tile, her tiny feet icy against the cold floor. She moved with the caution of someone who'd done this before. She paused behind the wide kitchen island, crouching low, watching. She knew the staff's schedule, knew that Mrs. Keene, the head cook, always left a few dishes behind before locking up, and sometimes, if Millie was lucky, there was something left uneaten. She peeked up. A white plate sat on the counter, forgotten, with a single slice of bread curled slightly at the edges. Millie reached up slowly, balancing on her toes. Her fingers grazed the bread. She grabbed it, her little stomach clenched with anticipation. Then, click. The kitchen lights flooded the room. Millie froze. The plate slipped from the counter and clattered against the marble. In the doorway stood a tall man in a dark robe, Elliot Grayson himself. His eyes, cold gray, narrowed in confusion. He hadn't expected to see anyone, least of all, a barefoot child stealing bread from his kitchen. Millie backed away slowly, clutching the slice to her chest. I'm sorry, she stammered. Her voice was barely above a whisper. I didn't mean to. I was just really hungry. She looked up at him, wide-eyed, terrified. Elliot didn't speak. He looked at her, really looked. The pink dress, the messy hair, the bare feet, the trembling hands. She reminded him of a photo he once saw of himself as a child. Thin, hungry, unnoticed. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated. "Millie." He nodded, took a step forward. She flinched. "I'm not mad," he said softly. Millie blinked. "I wasn't going to steal anything else. Just the bread. Just tonight," she whispered. "Mama didn't eat again. She said she did, but I heard her stomach." Elliot's chest tightened. He looked around, at the untouched fruit bowl, the spotless counters, the silent fridge, and then back at Millie, whose hands were still shaking. For years, his house had been cold, precise, untouched, and now a barefoot child had entered it, brave, hungry, and heartbreakingly polite. He took another step, reached past her, and flicked off the harsh ceiling light, leaving only the glow from under the cabinets. "You're not in trouble," he said again, his voice barely more than a breath. Millie looked up at him, and for the first time in years, something warm moved through the Grayson kitchen. Elliot Grayson stood in his own kitchen, unsure of what to do with the tiny stranger staring up at him. Millie still clutched the slice of bread like it was her last treasure. Her eyes were wide, brimming with tears she refused to let fall. She looked like she might run, but had nowhere to go. "I'm not going to hurt you," Elliot said quietly. Millie didn't move. He slowly knelt down to her level. The floor was cold through his robe, but he didn't notice. "You're hungry." She nodded. "I'm not supposed to be here," Mama said. "Not to come. But my tummy..." Her voice cracked. "It hurts." Elliot looked at the slice in her hand. Dry, stiff around the edges, not even buttered. "Stay here," he said gently, and stood. He moved to the refrigerator, opened it, and scanned the contents like he hadn't done in years. He pulled out a small jug of milk, a block of butter, and a fresh loaf of bread. With slow, deliberate movements, he placed 2 slices in the toaster. Then he poured a glass of milk and set it on the counter. Millie watched him with cautious wonder. When the toast popped, he spread a generous layer of butter on each slice and cut them diagonally, just like his mother used to. He pulled out a wooden stool and placed it gently near the island. Then, in the softest voice he had used in years, said, "Come sit." Millie hesitated, then padded forward, climbed onto the stool, and sat with her knees pulled up, feet dangling. Elliot placed the plate in front of her and slid the glass of milk beside it. She stared at the food for a moment, as if unsure it was real. Then she picked up a triangle and took a bite. A moment passed, then another. And then she smiled. Not a polite smile, not a forced one. A real, wide-eyed, crumb-on-the-cheek smile that lit up her entire face. Elliot swallowed hard. No one had smiled like that in this house for a long, long time. She took another bite, then looked up at him. "This is the best bread I ever had." He nodded once. "It's just toast." "No," she said with absolute certainty. "It's warm. Warm bread tastes like someone made it for you." Elliot had no reply, just a sudden ache in his chest. She sipped her milk and wiped her mouth with the back of her sleeve. "Mama always lets me eat first. She says she's full, but she's not. Her belly talks at night. It makes noises when she thinks I'm asleep." Elliot's jaw tightened. "What's your mama's name?" he asked. "Lena. She works in the kitchen. Late shift. She's tired all the time." Millie chewed another bite and said between mouthfuls, "She's pretty, but she hides it. She says we gotta stay quiet and invisible." He felt that word, invisible, settle in the air between them. Millie fished something from the pocket of her dress. It was small, worn smooth from fingers and years. A plastic hair clip, shaped like a heart. The pink had faded to almost white. "This was hers," she said. "When she was a little girl. She gave it to me when we moved here. She said if I'm scared, I should hold it and remember she loves me." She held it out. Elliot stared at the object, then at the girl. He had seen million-dollar art, diamonds, portfolios. None of it felt as precious as the tiny clip in her hand. He didn't take it. But something inside him, long rusted shut, moved. "You must love her very much," he said softly. Millie nodded. "She's the only person who ever kept me." The silence that followed was not empty. Elliot sat down across from her. Not as a billionaire, not as the master of the house, just a man who remembered being a boy with no one who made him toast. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, he didn't feel quite so alone. Millie had just swallowed the last bite of her toast when the sound of footsteps echoed down the marble hallway. Fast, panicked. Lena Carter burst into the kitchen, breathless, eyes wide. Her blonde hair, normally pulled into a neat braid, was loose and slipping out, strands sticking to her forehead. Her chef's uniform was wrinkled, flour-dusted. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Millie," she gasped, "what are you doing?" Millie turned, lips still buttery, a smear of cheese on her cheek, milk in one hand. She looked at her mother with the guilt of a child who knows she's broken a rule too big to fix. Lena rushed forward, dropping to her knees and wrapping her arms around the little girl. "You cannot run off like that, baby," she whispered, voice shaking. "Do you know how scared I was? I thought you were." She couldn't even finish. Elliot stood nearby, quiet. He didn't interrupt, didn't explain. He just watched. His eyes moved to Lena, her trembling hands, the way she cradled her daughter, her voice hoarse with fear and love all at once. She wasn't just a mother, she was all this little girl had. Lena turned to him, still holding Millie close. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Grayson," she said quickly, standing. Her voice wavered. "I didn't know she'd left the staff quarters. I'll take full responsibility." Her gaze dropped. She didn't try to make excuses. Elliot opened his mouth to speak, but before a word could leave him, "Carter." The voice came from behind them, sharp, unforgiving. Nora, the housekeeper, stood in the doorway, back straight, eyes already scanning the scene like a courtroom. She took in Millie, milk in hand, perched on the forbidden stool, clearly having eaten from the main kitchen, and then Lena, out of breath and clearly out of place. "What exactly is going on here?" she demanded. Lena tensed. Nora stepped forward. "Your daughter is in the main kitchen, eating food intended for the household. It's well past 8. That is a direct violation of staff policy." Lena tightened her grip on Millie's shoulder. "I understand. I'll leave right away." Nora turned to Elliot, already reaching for her phone. "Sir, I will call security. This is a clear breach of conduct. Cooks don't bring children into private quarters. She brought her daughter here, broke protocol, and let her." "No one is calling anyone," Elliot said, lifting one hand slowly. His voice wasn't loud, but it sliced through the room like thunder. The kitchen fell silent. Nora froze mid-step. "But sir, Tell me, Nora," Elliot said, his gaze fixed on her, calm but cold. "What rule says a hungry child doesn't deserve to eat?" Nora blinked. "This is a household, not a charity. There are systems. And if those systems don't allow compassion," Elliot said, stepping forward, "then maybe they're broken." He reached across the counter and gently wiped the smear of cheese from Millie's cheek with a napkin. His hand moved with surprising care. He still didn't look at Nora. "If we cannot offer kindness in this house," he continued, "then what are we even protecting?" For a long moment, the room held its breath. Nora's lips parted, but no sound came out. "If that's your final decision," she finally muttered, retreating stiffly, "I will. Stand down." Without waiting for a response, she turned and left, her heels clicking sharply against the tile. Elliot turned back to Lena. She looked frozen, still shielding Millie like a mother expecting the worst. Her eyes shimmered, not with anger, but with something deeper: shame, exhaustion, maybe even disbelief. "No one's being fired," Elliot said, his voice softer now. "At least, not you." Lena looked up. Their eyes met. It was the first time they truly saw each other, two people from different worlds, standing in the same kitchen, drawn together by a little girl and a slice of bread. And in that brief, breathless silence, something shifted. The hallway was quiet as Elliot walked beside Lena and Millie, their footsteps muffled by the thick silk runner that stretched down the corridor like a river of velvet. It wasn't protocol. It wasn't what anyone in the house would expect. Staff used the service hallway, always. But Elliot didn't pause or explain. He simply walked ahead, turning lights on as he went. Lena glanced at him, confused, but said nothing. Millie, already tired, clung to her mother's hand with the other wrapped tightly around her hair clip. When they reached the west wing, Elliot stopped in front of a carved oak door. "This one," he said, and opened it. Lena gasped softly. The room beyond was large but welcoming. Pale green walls, a cream love seat near the fireplace, thick curtains, and a queen bed with soft bedding already turned down. "The green room?" she asked, startled. "Isn't this for family?" Elliot looked at her. "Yes." Before she could protest, Millie yawned and leaned against her. Elliot stepped forward and carefully lifted the little girl into his arms. She didn't resist. She simply rested her head on his shoulder and sighed. He carried her to the bed and gently laid her down, pulling the blanket over her small frame. She curled up immediately, the way children do when they finally feel safe. He hesitated for a moment, then knelt and adjusted the blanket around her legs, tucking it under like someone who hadn't done it in years but remembered how. Lena stood at the foot of the bed, unsure whether to cry or apologize. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," Elliot replied without looking up. But as he stood, he noticed something. Her right hand. It trembled slightly, fingers curled inward, the skin along the side of her palm red and blistered. "You're burned," he said. She instinctively tucked her hand behind her. "It's nothing, just a bit of oil. I was frying donuts earlier." He frowned. "You should have that looked at." Lena smiled faintly. I'm used to it. They have to be golden on both sides, or the kids complain. The staff kids, I mean. Not Millie. She never complains. That small detail, the quiet way she explained her pain, not as a burden, but as a condition of her job, stayed with him longer than he expected. He looked at her then, really looked. Not as a kitchen worker, not as the woman who'd just broken a house rule, but as someone who bore pain quietly, gracefully, without ever expecting comfort in return. Behind them, Millie stirred. She didn't open her eyes, just clutched her small plastic hair clip tighter in one hand and mumbled in her sleep, "Mama says keep this close. It's the prettiest thing she had when she was little, like she keeps me." Elliot turned his head away, jaw tight. He hadn't heard something so honest in years. It wasn't just the words, it was the truth behind them, the kind of love that didn't demand anything, just gave. Lena walked to the side of the bed and gently kissed her daughter's forehead. She brushed a curl behind Millie's ear, then turned to Elliot. "I'll stay only tonight. I don't want to." "You'll stay here as long as you need," he interrupted gently. Lena looked surprised, touched. Her eyes shimmered but didn't fall. She nodded once. "Thank you." Elliot stepped out first, pausing at the door. He looked back one last time. Lena sat beside the bed now, watching her daughter sleep, her expression calm, even beautiful. He left the door slightly ajar. And for the first time in that house in years, the west wing didn't feel empty. The sun had just begun to warm the tops of the trees outside when Elliot Grayson stepped into his own kitchen, quietly, awkwardly, like a guest in someone else's home. He glanced around, as if the appliances might judge him. The cook wasn't in yet, neither was any of the staff. Elliot rolled up the sleeves of his navy robe, stared down at the recipe card he'd Googled at 5:47 a.m., and took a breath like a man about to disarm a bomb. Pancakes. How hard could it be? The answer: harder than expected. He cracked 2 eggs into a bowl, one shell followed. He stirred in milk, added flour, then a little too much baking powder. A cloud of it puffed into his face, dusting his nose. He coughed, blinked, and reached for the whisk with the determination of a CEO tackling a spreadsheet. 10 minutes later, he was standing over the griddle, watching his pancake creation, lumpy, uneven, slightly charred at the edges, sputter like it was protesting. Then a tiny voice echoed behind him. "Mr. Elliot." He turned. Millie stood in the doorway, eyes wide, feet bare, her little pink pajama set wrinkled from sleep. She took one look at the pancake on the skillet, and then at him. She giggled. "That's the ugliest pancake I've ever seen," she declared. "But I still want to eat it, because you made it." Elliot chuckled under his breath, wiping sweat and flour from his brow. "Give me a few tries. I might get one right." She skipped toward him and climbed onto a stool. "It's okay. My mama burns toast sometimes, but she says love makes it taste better." Before Elliot could respond, Lena appeared in the doorway, still tying her apron over her simple cotton dress. Her hair was pulled back loosely again, and her eyes looked surprised to see the two of them. She didn't laugh. She didn't say a word at first. She just walked forward, picked up a clean kitchen towel, and without a word, gently dabbed the streak of flour off the tip of Elliot's nose. Her touch was light, natural, familiar in a way that startled him. "This," she said softly, "is the mark of someone cooking for someone else, for the first time." Elliot looked at her, and for one long moment, didn't move. Something inside him shifted. "When you wiped the flour off my face," he thought, "it felt like you were wiping dust off my heart." He turned back to the griddle and flipped the pancake, now slightly burned on one side. Millie clapped anyway. When they sat down to eat, the three of them gathered around the small breakfast table. Just 3 plates, 3 forks, and a stack of pancakes that ranged from passable to crispy. Millie devoured hers with syrup all over her cheeks. "I asked Mama one time," she said through a mouthful, "if we'll always eat just us two. And she told me." She paused to swallow. "She told me that one day, a kind man won't let her eat alone anymore." Elliot froze, his fork hovering mid-air. Lena's face flushed. "Millie." But the little girl shrugged. "It's true." Elliot stared down at his plate. He couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten a real breakfast with anyone. Couldn't remember the last time he wanted to stay at the table longer than necessary. He looked up at them, at the way Lena gently wiped syrup off Millie's chin, at how the girl leaned into her mother like a flower toward the sun. And he realized he didn't want this to be temporary. Not because it was kind, but because it finally felt real. The Grayson estate had never looked, or felt, so alive. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the east wing, warming the air that had once been heavy with stillness. The velvet curtains were gone, replaced with soft linen drapes. New paint covered the once somber walls, earth tones, chosen by someone who knew how to make a house feel like a home. That someone was Lena. At Elliot's request, she had taken charge of redesigning parts of the estate, beginning with the sitting room, then the solarium, and now the guest wing. She didn't just bring taste, she brought light. Even the staff, some of whom had once kept a careful distance, now greeted her with nods of quiet respect. Elliot watched it all from the sidelines, how she touched each corner of the house as if healing it. But it wasn't just the house that changed. One afternoon, while walking back from the stables, Elliot heard laughter, bright, high-pitched, unmistakably Millie's. He followed it toward the garden, where the little girl was running barefoot across the lawn, chasing butterflies. "Slow down," Lena called out, laughing. But Millie didn't. A second later, too fast, too sharp, she tripped. Elliot's heart seized as he sprinted across the yard. Lena was only steps behind him, but Elliot reached her first, scooping Millie into his arms before she even began to cry. "I got you, sweetheart," he whispered, brushing the dirt from her knees, checking her elbows for scrapes. Her lip quivered, but she didn't cry. She wrapped her arms around his neck. "You okay?" he asked gently. Millie nodded against his shoulder. Elliot looked at her, and then, without thinking, said softly, "You know, any man lucky enough to carry you in his arms for life is someone who should never let you go." Later that evening, as Lena tucked Millie into bed, the girl looked up at her with those wise, wondering eyes and asked, "Mama, if Mr. Elliot marries you one day, can I call him Dad?" Lena froze. Outside the cracked bedroom door, Elliot stood in the hallway, having arrived just in time to hear the question. He didn't enter. He didn't say a word. But his breath caught, and his eyes burned in a way they hadn't in years. He walked away in silence, and the warmth of the house flickered, just slightly. It began the next morning, whispers, small, tight conversations in corners of the house, paused when Lena passed by. Nora was subtle, too subtle to accuse outright, but sharp enough to plant seeds, that Lena was overstepping, that her sudden proximity to Mr. Grayson was not earned, that a single mother didn't redesign the Grayson estate out of kindness. "She knows what she's doing," Nora said once, just loud enough for the kitchen maid to hear. "It's always the quiet ones you watch." The whispers grew. By week's end, Lena found a note slid under her door. No signature, just 4 words, "Don't get comfortable here." She said nothing, but the next morning, she left a short letter on Elliot's desk. "I'd like to take a week off, just to give space. I never meant to cause trouble. Thank you for your kindness." When Elliot found the note, something broke in him. He went to the solarium, the room Lena had filled with light and peace, and stood in the middle of it, realizing how empty it now felt, how quiet. He walked the halls and felt the hush return. No giggles from the staircase, no clinking tea mugs, no soft humming from the kitchen. That night, he sat in the green room, Millie's little hair clip still resting on the mantel where she had left it during play. And for the first time since he lost his fiancée, Elliot didn't feel just lonely, he felt lost. Not because Lena and Millie had left the house, but because the house no longer felt like home without them. Elliot sat alone in his study, the soft ticking of the grandfather clock echoing through the silence. The room had once been his sanctuary, a place of logic, control, and perfectly aligned papers. But now, it felt hollow. His eyes drifted to the chair across from his desk. It was empty. A week ago, Lena had sat there beside him, sketching curtain patterns, talking about how light could change the feel of a room. Her voice had been calm, thoughtful. She never pushed. She simply offered pieces of herself, carefully, like gifts he hadn't known how much he needed. He leaned back, his gaze unfocused, mind replaying the little things. The way her fingers curled around a cup of tea when the morning air turned cold. The way she bit her lip when choosing between two fabrics. The quiet strength in her eyes whenever Millie ran to her with a scraped knee or wildflower bouquet. And then, there was the drawing. He stood, walked to the cabinet near the far wall, and opened the door. It was still there, taped to the inside. Crayons on printer paper. 3 stick figures. A tall man with messy hair, a blonde woman in a dress, and a little girl in a pink triangle skirt, all holding hands. A sun in the corner. Above them, written in clumsy purple letters, "My family someday." His throat tightened. He hadn't cried in years, not when his parents passed, not even at his fiancée's funeral. But now, alone in a room full of everything money could buy, he let go. He sat on the edge of the leather couch and wept. Quiet, breathless sobs. Because none of this, the estate, the art, the legacy, meant anything without the soft sound of Millie's laughter echoing off the walls, without the smell of Lena's cinnamon scones in the kitchen, without the hum of life. By the time dusk fell, he had made his decision. The apartment was modest, on the 2nd floor of an older building on the edge of town. Elliot climbed the stairs 2 at a time, carrying nothing but a cream-colored envelope. He knocked. Lena opened the door, startled. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, and she wore a faded gray sweatshirt. There was a tiredness in her eyes, but also warmth. "Mr. Grayson," she said softly, surprised. "Elliot," he corrected. He handed her the envelope. She hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a short letter. Handwritten. "This isn't a contract. It's not an offer of employment. It's an invitation to come home. Not to the estate, to me, because now I know home isn't a place. It's you and her." Lena's lips trembled. She looked up, tears in her eyes. "You don't have to do this." "I know," he whispered. "I'm not doing it because I have to." He stepped closer, his voice low, his words slow and careful. "I'm doing it because without you and Millie, I don't know how to live anymore. I thought I had built a life, but it was only a structure. You gave it meaning." Silence wrapped around them like a blanket. Then Lena took a shaky breath. "She missed you, you know. Every night. She keeps asking when she can go back to our green room." Elliot smiled, his eyes wet. "It's still hers. It always will be." And in that moment, the weight between them lifted, not completely, not magically, but enough for both of them to breathe. Together. The sun was high, casting golden light across the garden. Balloons swayed gently from the hedges, and a small table was covered in pink cupcakes, lemonade, and a birthday cake shaped like a castle. Laughter echoed through the air. Millie, dressed in a fluffy pink princess dress with a sparkly tiara slightly tilted on her head, ran barefoot across the grass, her curls bouncing as she twirled. "Daddy Ellie," she called, giggling. "Come, chase me." Elliot Grayson, now out of his usual tailored suit and wearing jeans and a soft gray sweater, paused, mid-conversation, with a staff member, and turned. His smile was instant, effortless. "Daddy Ellie," he repeated under his breath, almost in disbelief. He began to chase her, running slowly on purpose, arms out, letting her shriek with joy before he gently scooped her into the air. She squealed, wrapping her arms around his neck. "I got you," he whispered. "And I'm never letting go." Around them, guests smiled. House staff, gardeners, drivers, the cook, all invited, all welcome. It wasn't just a birthday party, it was something deeper, a celebration of beginnings. When the cake was brought out, everyone gathered. Millie sat between Elliot and Lena, her hands clasped, her eyes glowing. After the song and the candles, Elliot stood up and cleared his throat. In his hand was a small box, wrapped in light pink paper. "Millie," he said, kneeling in front of her, "you once gave me something very special, a little pink hair clip with a heart. Do you remember?" She nodded shyly. "Well, I wanted to give you something too, something to remind you of who you are." He opened the box. Inside was a delicate music box, carved from pale wood. On its lid, attached gently, was the very same pink heart-shaped clip, restored, polished, but unchanged. When Millie opened it, soft music played, and engraved on the inside were the words, "For the bravest girl and the kindest mom my family." Lena's hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes filled before she could stop them. Millie whispered, "Mommy, look." She turned the music box in her hands like it was treasure, then turned to Elliot and climbed into his lap. "I love it," she said simply. Elliot looked up at Lena, then stood slowly. He reached for her hand, not dramatically, not for a crowd, but quietly, as if they were the only two people in the world. He didn't kneel. He didn't propose. He just placed his hand over hers and said, "No titles, no pressure. I just want you to stay, every day, as long as you want. This house is yours. This life, if you want it, is ours." Lena's voice cracked through the lump in her throat. "You already gave me everything, Elliot." Millie wrapped her arms around both of them, squeezing with all the strength in her tiny frame. "We're a home now, right?" she asked softly. "Home is where all three of us are." Lena nodded, kissing the top of her daughter's head. Elliot rested his forehead gently against Lena's. And for the first time, no one felt like a guest. Not in the house, not in each other's lives. Just a family. No blood required. Only love. Sometimes, family isn't written in blood. It's written in the quiet moments. In pancakes burned out of love, in little pink hair clips, and in the bravery to let someone in. If this story touched your heart the way it touched ours, don't forget to subscribe and hit the hype button to support the Soul Stirring Stories channel. Your support helps us continue to share stories that heal, stories that inspire, and stories that remind us love can find us, even in the unlikeliest places. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and keep believing in second chances.